Welcome to Response-Able Parenting, the podcast that shows you how to parent in alignment to your emotions, needs, and goals versus your programming, bad advice, and let's face it, outdated strategies that just don't work. You'll get in the trenches support on nervous system and emotional regulation, critical mindset shifts, stronger communication strategies, and more. In this podcast, you'll gain transformational tools that take you from reacting to every frustration to responding with clarity, regulation, and finally setting the example you desire for your kids. I'm Becky Jennings, your new parenting coach, and this is the Response-Able Parenting podcast. Let's get into it. We are in for a treat today with Nikki Sapiro Vinckier. Nikki is a clinician, creator, and mom of three. She sees firsthand how parents and kids alike are impacted by systemic chaos. With over a decade as an OBGYN physician assistant, she's helped families navigate everything from adolescence to postpartum and menopause. She's always focusing on trauma-informed care and honest conversations. This is a conversation that is a must, especially as we are moving into the era of unknown care when it comes to reproductive health. So I am really excited for you to get a new, fresh perspective, to understand the ins and outs of what you can advocate for, and all around just learning more about how we can speak up, how we can prepare, and how we can really protect ourselves and our children in some of these unknown gray areas around reproductive health. So let's dive into the conversation. Everybody, welcome back to another episode. We are going to be talking all things reproductive health. We're going to be talking about medical empowerment today for our children. And this is kind of a little bit of a divergent from the ADHD and the typical behavioral stuff, but it's actually really important to talk about because I don't know about you, but sometimes when my kid, we can do all the practice and all the positive parenting and all the building up of your body, your choice, all of this stuff in the house. But as soon as you get into the doctor's office, as soon as, maybe your kid touches another kid in public, that kind of goes all out the window. So I'm so excited to talk to Nikki today because she's going to really empower us as the parent to help us empower our kids in a medical setting. So Nikki, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So why don't you tell everybody about you, your background, what you do, and what you specialize in?
Awesome. So yeah, I'm an OBGYN PA. I've been in the clinic for the last decade, and now I spend a lot of time doing reproductive healthcare content, kind of showing up online, specifically to listening to a lot of the things that our adolescents are hearing and experiencing online. And I wrote a book called We Deserve More, and it talks about how the reproductive healthcare system is broken and what we can do about it. And a lot of the pieces within my book talk about being your own patient advocate and really advocating for your own best interests and getting the healthcare system to work for you. And one of the kind of patient demographics that I really loved working with most was adolescent, because especially within reproductive healthcare, I found that patients would come in kind of so ashamed is the wrong word, but sad and not empowered and not educated. And as a society, we don't educate enough on reproductive health care. And so that was kind of part of why I loved going into this field, was I felt like I had this opportunity to really educate people and work with them and alongside them. And I really love getting to do that with adolescent and kind of watching them grow into their body and grow into their healthcare experience and autonomy. And so as I wrote this book, adolescent was kind of like a piece of the puzzle as well for me. And so I'm excited to be here to kind of talk about all the ways that it interweaves.
I love that. I love that. So, for most of us millennial parents, right? The elder millennials, if you will, we kind of were first introduced to birth control with acne or, because we weren't really, I can speak only for myself. Wasn't sexually active as a teenager because I was too afraid of my dad. But also, that was kind of our first thing, or maybe we went to Planned Parenthood, or, we didn't really have a plan in place. And I know my mother never told me about what happens at the gynecologist and what to ask about or what to do. And I think my first and only gynecologist appointment that I had in my early, youth was like in New York when I was like just moved there in my 20s. I was like, I didn't know any of this stuff. So what has shifted? I mean, I feel like that's the standard of the story for us. What has shifted, and how can parents feel more empowered now?
Yeah, that's such a great question because so much has shifted, right? Like the landscape feels completely different. And I also think like when we were younger, we were so much more naive in so many ways. And we were like, oh, acne, going on birth control, like, okay, it makes sense. And I think right now too, our youth are so much more inundated with these topics all the time, with the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Like when we went into healthcare settings, it was us and our clinician, and we really trusted all the things that they had to say.
Yeah.
And I think right now we really find ourselves at a moment where people don't innately trust healthcare as much as they did. People don't innately take their clinician's recommendation without question. And I'm not saying that they should, but I'm just saying that that's kind of when we paint the picture of what's different, that's a big piece of it, right? There's so much more that's happening in the landscape and painting the picture before we even walk through the doors of the doctor's office. And so I think that that's an important kind of foundation to lay, is that it's totally different for our kids than it was when we went in and saw doctors when we were, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and you just took what they said at face value, right? Now these adolescents are coming in and they've chat GPT'd every symptom, every issue, every positive, negative, benefit, drawback of birth control or not before they've, even considered talking about it. And so I think that that's a really different piece at baseline. Similarly,
It's so interesting you say that. Sorry to cut you off, but like when I freshly turned 40, I started getting all these crazy symptoms, and I was going to rheumatologists, endocrinologists, like my own doctor, my gynecologist, and everybody was like, "We don't know, your labs are perfect." And I was like listening to every single one of them. And one of them at one point was like, "We think you have lupus." And I was like, "What? I have lupus?" Like it was so crazy. And I went and did my own research, and I started following a menopausal food-based diet, and every single one of my symptoms went away. And they will still tell you I'm not in perimenopause.
yeah.
Based off my labs. And so, yeah, you're so right. It's just like we have access to so much more information too. And a lot of the clinicians weren't necessarily trained in these specialized areas. And so it seems like almost like we have more information. I don't want to say we have more information we do at our fingertips. And so we can advocate in a way different way.
Yeah, and you and I had kind of mentioned this off the gate, but we go through it's kind of a cruel system the way that it's designed, that moms are often in perimenopause or going into menopause as adolescent are going through puberty.
It's the rudest timeline.
So awful. But I do think so much of exactly what we're talking about now applies to us as we advocate for changes in our bodies that are happening in our late 30s and 40s. And some of these same ways that we want to empower our kids are the same ways that we need to be listening to our own bodies and empowering ourselves as we're navigating the healthcare system. So I do think that it is like kind of by design and by nature of this like age gap that we've tended to have our kids at, that we're hitting this like perimenopause and adolescent puberty at the same time. And I heard somebody call perimenopause puberty for old people. And it is, right? It's this shift in hormones, and it is cruel and it's unpredictable. And we have access to so much more education about it and so much more that we can learn, that we're not just like at the, at the whim of the clinician only, right? And that's a great thing. So I think there's that piece of it. And then how do we want to do things differently than what we had, right? What were the things that served us? What were the things that didn't work for us? And then clinically, we've seen several things have changed as well. So many of us, the guidelines back as we were going through, puberty and aging was we got pap smears at age 18. And now we don't start doing pelvic exams and pap smears until age 21. So that's a really different experience as you're seeing an OBGYN clinician, is when are you getting naked in their visit, right? For
100%.
us, it happened so much earlier. And there were also like very weird things that happened where some clinicians would do pelvic exams when you would go on birth control, even though there's no real reason why that was indicated or necessary. That's like not a thing anymore, thank goodness, right? And
Yeah.
so how do we teach our kids in the next generation that this is different than what we had? We don't want to fearmonger them based off of our experiences that we had growing up. And really, we want to empower them to have an accurate representation of what their experience can look like.
Absolutely. I remember you mentioning something along the lines of generationally we had to be like the good patient. And in that, gosh, I feel like that was like always, it was always like, got to be the good girl. You got to be, listen to what they say, and always kind of just take their advice and don't necessarily advocate and don't ask questions. Like that, I feel like was you just like, you went in, and then you came out. Like that was it. It was just like, that's how it went. You didn't say like anything. So what are some of those ways that, as we're getting more empowered and more aware, and we just have so much, we just are smarter. It just feels like we're smarter. Well, we're evolving in some ways, but sliding back in others. What are some of those questions? What are some of the posturing and ways we can advocate for ourselves, for our children? What's your advice there?
Yeah. I think you saying that generationally we were the good patients, I think that's so spot on. And I think that we still are, right? I think that that's like patriarchy as a system when we look at women's health. Like I I talk about this in the book that I wrote, that I saw this reel of somebody saying that they saw another woman at a nail appointment, and she advocated to change the color of her nails because she hated the color of her nails. And she said, that's going to be our first female president. Like, it's not just us in a healthcare system. It's us when we get a meal that we ordered that's incorrect. It's us if we're at a nail technician where the nails are wrong. It's like, it's in every moment we as women have been told to be confrontation adverse. And it's not that it's confrontational at all, as much as it is like seeing where we're
Speaking up about what you want and like need. Yes.
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 So I think that is not just that we were good patients when we were younger. I think that we are expected to be that palatable female all the time still.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So like, I think that just commenting that that's a larger experience than even what you presented that to be is so important.
Yes.
And I think that acknowledging that and recognizing that is the first step to being able to say, hey, this isn't working for me, right? And figuring out, well, what are the pieces that aren't working for me, right? For you, as you were talking about, as you hit 40 and you were noticing those kind of like perimenopausal changes, like really self-triaging, taking time to sit down, to journal, to write down, to track those changes, to calendar them, to notice, are there things that kind of show up consistently? I think that's a big piece of it, so that when you do go into the clinic, you have receipts that you're bringing with you, right? And bringing our kids on that journey with us. When they're telling you that they're hurting, when they're telling you little things like they have a sore throat, right? Like having them sit down with you on a calendar and writing down, like, okay, on as simple as it is, at whatever age you start, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 feels like the worst pain you've ever had in your life, what does your sore throat feel like right now? Right? And then they come home from school, or you give them Tylenol and you ask them 2 hours later, same scale, and you track that. And you're essentially teaching your child to know and understand their body, their symptoms, their cues, what helps, what doesn't, is it improving? Is it worsening? Like, these are all such simple concepts of understanding our body that we take for granted at times. And honestly, that we're not even that good at as a generation. So, how do we make this next generation better able to understand their own cues, right? That was never taught to me. I have been hangry my whole life. If someone could just explain to me, like, hey, Nikki, when you're hungry, you get angry, like why it took me 38 years to figure this out, it's
Yes.
like beyond me, you know?
Oh, yes, that's so funny. My friends and I were talking about that a couple days ago. It's like we almost forget that day 27 and day 28, we are horrible human beings, but it surprises us every single time. Every time.
Every time,
Yes.
every time I'm still surprised when I get my period and I'm like, oh yeah, that's why I picked the fight with my husband. Yes.
100%. You know, it's so funny that you say the tracking and the just the writing it down. This is like the bread and butter of what I do with my clients when we're tracking behavior change too. So this is technically a behavior change and how we're showing up. And when I'm working with clients, we quite literally have a spreadsheet that we track the scenarios and what's happening and what improvements. How long did the meltdown last? Is it shorter? Is it, like, because we sometimes in the heat of the moment, we're like, we had another meltdown, but it was like, did the meltdown go from a half an hour down to 22 minutes? That's progress, and that's kind of the way in which I try to view a lot of behavior change, because it can be so emotional, is data. Let's bring as much data to the table as possible so we can actually kind of remove that emotional piece to it and the confusion and the intensity, and actually focus on the metrics of what is changing, because I think that's really, really important. And the other thing that you brought up about the good patient is like that also, I feel like we are kind of at that intersection of like, we are fully living into my body, my choice, and we have a lot of legislation and things that are kind of forcing us to go go hard on that if that's something that we truly believe in. And at the same time, that good patient shows up like in public when our kids do something wrong, and we have that like almost the desire to still maintain as a female parent, like the good patient. And so we're almost projecting onto our child in the moment too, like, you can't do that, you can't touch somebody like that, you can't. And we aren't fully finishing the sentence of that body literacy, that body advocacy in public as well.
Yeah, I think when it comes to that body literacy part in public too, it's so complex because so many of us are survivors of sexual assault too.
Yeah.
So I think you have so much unresolved, unhealed trauma that surfaces in that moment as well. Whether we were the one who was on the receiving end of the touch, whether we were like all of those pieces, I think that there's the my body, my touch, my body, my choice. And there's also like the consent-based education that we're trying to do all at the same time.
Yes.
And it's a really, really difficult balance. It's a really difficult balance.
Yeah. What are some ways that you help empower parents in terms of just educating them on maybe specific phrases, maybe ways of reframing the conversation that don't make it so muddy and confusing?
Yeah, I think that from the very beginning, anatomical language only is like the most important piece of the puzzle. And so from the very get-go, right, my kids have all used anatomical language to the point where my 5-year-old daughter like got on a stool the other day and she like got on it uncomfortably and she was like, ah, my vagina. Right? And like it makes the like little good patient, good me, like even me feel a little uncomfortable because I have this 5-year-old girl who's screaming vagina. Like it feels like the penis game that we played where you like whispered it until you said it louder and got uncomfortable,
Right.
Like it's still, even to me who says the word vagina all the goddamn time as an OBGYN PA, like it still made me feel uncomfortable in that moment.
Yeah.
And it is entirely critical that we use anatomical language with our kids for a multitude of reasons, but it also is proven to help reduce the rate and frequency of sexual assault because we know that young kids will report it differently and it is understood differently than if we're using like, slang terms for that body part. So I think that that piece is really important. And it kind of takes the stigma out of it. I say vagina the same way I talk about it being your arm, the same way I talk about your hair. Like if I can start at a young age to destigmatize reproductive health care as
Mhm.
part of anatomy the same way any other anatomical issue is, then you will feel less uncomfortable talking to me about vaginal discharge down the road than you would if you stubbed your toe, right? Like, I want the goal to be that you don't have any shame or stigma talking about anything because it's reproductive health care related than if it's any other piece. And the only way we get there is by normalizing it as, normal.
Yes. I mean, that's not to be like so ridiculous, but that's the exact same thing as like in the beginning, never like pooping at your boyfriend's house, right? It's like it's still a bodily function and that we have to do it, It's so funny. I feel like my boys actually know more about the female reproductive system than they know about their own because I talk about it so much. Like I am so crystal clear about we call it egg time in the house. Because they know like don't mess with mom during egg time because like that's like like it's a very clear like this all I have to say is it's egg time and they like put their hands up, they're like whoa, and they kind of step back. But my goal is to ultimately like teach them like when you have friends or girlfriends or wives or just like any woman that who is maybe experiencing this part of her month, like this is not when you double down on poking the bear and you do what you can to support, And so it's funny when I was like taking my son to a swim meet and it was like 7 a.m. and I just started my period and I was like, oh my God, I have to pull over and get Midol. Like this is like, I can't stand at a swim meet for 7 hours feeling the way I feel. And so he was like, what's the difference between that and like Tylenol? And I'm like, I don't know, but it actually works for this location. And he's like, what's the location? And so like I'm explaining to him, like I fully explained to him that like an egg wasn't fertilized and it comes out and it comes out and it comes out via like a transfer of blood. And my youngest, he must have been like 4 at the time. And he was like, so you compost your eggs? Because I said like, because we were just getting into composting and I said like it's an unusable egg and so it like leaves the body and like I discard it essentially, and he was like, so you compost it? I'm like, sort of. Sort of like composting but not. But they know, and now they're starting to ask me questions about like, okay, so that happens to you, and we've talked about like if you see one of your friends and her pants have blood on it, like you don't point it out, you go give them your sweatshirt, you go take things like that so that they know this is happening, it's 100% normal, you should expect it all the time, and this isn't a moment to be like, oh, do you see that? Do you see what's happening to her? That's your moment where you step in and you're like, hey, FYI, this has happened. Here's my sweatshirt. Let's go to the nurse. So we actually like practice that sometimes because my kids, he's a hop, skip, and a jump from middle school. And so we're talking about that. And like the girls around him, they are clearly starting to develop, which is, it's going to happen. And he asked me, he's like, what could happen to me? Like, what could happen to me? Like, that's all happening to them, but like, do I have anything? And I'm like, yes, let's talk. And so we started talking about like what could happen for him and his reproduction and like what could happen at night. How could he wake up in the middle of the night with something changing in his bed? And then like, what if he's in the middle of class and he gets a boner? And we were like talking about all of this stuff. And he was like, whoa, I had no idea. And I'm like, I have been spending far too much time teaching you about the female reproductive system. Had no clue what was coming down the pipeline for you. But it's just, these are the type of conversations. And, similarly, like we talk in the house, like a penis is just as similar as like an elbow or like an eyebrow. It's like, it's just part of your body. And of course there's like the boy thing where they're like, they get all excited to show it to you because that's the thing. And I feel like it will forever be the thing. But it's I think very important to have these conversations about like who's allowed to see it and touch it.
That's right.
What is allowed, like even when I'm drying my kids off from the shower, my youngest, like he's still so funny about it. He's like, "Oh gosh." And I'm like, I'm like, I can dry it once, but I'm not going back to dry it again. If you want to dry it again, you can, but like, I'll wrap the towel around your whole lower half and dry you. I'm not focusing on that one part. You know what I mean? Because that is yours, and I'm not going to be the one to, be touching it more. So it's just like, these are the conversations that I think are really important, because it starts to build that awareness of like, and even the pediatrician, he'll be like, there's only 3 people who are allowed to touch you. It's you, your parent, if they're looking at something for medical reasons and checking something, and then me every year with your consent to make sure it's growing and okay. Like, that's it, And so I think these conversations are really helpful to have. And, how I loved the story you were telling me before we even started recording, about how even as young as 4, you're teaching your kids to be asking and telling everything in the doctor's office. Can you share more about that? Because I certainly don't do that. I have literally a list of symptoms, and I'm like, Doc, here's the thing, because I want to get in and out, but this is way more helpful, and I'm going to be switching gears. So can you share a little bit about that?
So this isn't something that I've always done. This is something that I started doing since I wrote my book, because I realized the need for us to be practicing medical advocacy, and the need for us to be doing that like symptom triage that we're talking about. And so I had been sharing with Becky that my son had strep throat. And he's not even 4, he's 3.5. He turns 4 next month. And we went to the doctor, and the doctor's like, so what are you here for? And I just completely shut up, and I looked at my son and I said, tell the doctor why we're here. Right? And the goal is that I am the passenger. The goal is that I am there only to support if he's not able to do it. And the fact that at not even 4 years old, he did the whole visit on his own, right? So he said to the doctor, my throat hurts. And then the doctor asked him a slew of other symptoms. Do you feel this? Do you have whatever? And the doctor said, have you had any diarrhea? And my son looks at me and looks back at the doctor. He goes, well, yeah, I have, right? And so you have these moments where these kids are learning what's happening in my body. How is it showing up? And then like getting the test and getting the results and getting the diagnosis, getting the medication, hearing from the doctor, hey, here's the antibiotic that you have to take twice a day. Also, like, it makes me not the bad guy. The doctor kind of becomes the bad guy. Like, I'm not like the only one who's like, you have to take the medicine twice a day. Like, it becomes this experience where my kid starts to learn, how do I interact within the healthcare system? How do I navigate my own experience? How do I get the care that I want and need? And we can start that again, as early as 3 and 4 years old. And then what does that look like when going forward year after year and visit after visit, our 3-year-old, 4-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds have been saying, have been navigating their visits entirely on their own, right? Like, you don't want to be where your kid is 17, 18, and then you're like launching them and being like, okay, good luck with the doctor. Let me know if you need anything, right? Like, you really want them to feel that there was never a moment that they're like, okay, good luck, bird, fly away, right? In the doctor's office. You want them to feel like they had that autonomy that they kind of developed all along.
I started the program with Becky because I have and had difficulties at home with my 6-year-old. He was very triggered by something, and then I got triggered by that, and it all went together and gave a big explosion. Just after 1 week of Becky's program, also participating in the group course that she offers, and just through the way she's presenting the information, I've already done a lot of work on this topic, but I had a total breakthrough. We are progressing so much at home, and things are getting lighter. I'm feeling more connected to my son, understanding more what's going on with myself, have tools to deal with that. I really feel seen and heard by Becky. Like, one of the first things she wrote when we were in personal contact on Instagram is that you're not alone with this. And there was a lot of shame for me on that topic that me as a mother am not able to handle the situation. It was a great relief to see that in short time, in a few days, now I think in the third week of the program, I've managed changes that I've been trying to achieve for a very long time, for 2 years or so. I'm very happy, and I wish the same for you.
And say you have like a child who is like, the stage 5 clinger who is like, I can't leave mom's side. I can't, we talk a lot in my community about simulating like what to expect. How could you maybe simulate a doctor's visit or kind of prepare them ahead of time for what to expect, maybe some questions the doctor's going to ask? Because I know we're heading into my son's psychiatric appointment coming up next week, and I know the list of questions. The doctor has already sent them over. And so I'm going to be practicing ahead of time with my son so that he can feel empowered. And he can feel like he's actually not just giving the doctor the, I don't know, answers that typically come out.
Yeah. I think it goes back to kind of what we were saying earlier of asking your kid in advance, like, okay, let's talk about your symptoms on that scale of 1 to 10, charting that in terms of gathering that data. So if you notice that your kid's not going to be the one in that moment to be the one who like is able to be forthcoming with that information, then bringing that list with you, right? Bringing those symptoms that they've written, whether it is when you're kind of like doing a role play scenario or when you're just asking them. And then it's the same thing that we should be doing when we go in for visits too. When you have symptoms that are bothering you, when you have perimenopausal symptoms, you write them down and you bring them with you because we know perimenopause brain is real and you're gonna forget them. It's the exact same thing with kids, right? So like if we have these symptoms and if you did role play it, or if you did notice them in your kids, taking that list that you worked with them already and bringing it with you, you can try giving your kid that list to see if it's going to prompt them so they don't have to be so extemporaneous. So you've got that kind of like first layer of defense of, okay, they're not extemporaneously able to share that with the doctor, but here's the list that we've worked on together. Or at, not worst case, but like below that, you have this list that you brought in together that you're sharing from that list with the doctor. So at least your child knows, oh, I was involved in creating that list, right? I'm a part of this. None of this is happening without the participation of your child in the experience. And I
think that's the whole key. That's the whole piece of all of this. And by the way, that's the whole piece in my community as well of how we make actual long-lasting real behavior change is we have their buy-in and we have their consent, and we also have they're a part of the decision-making process.
I mean, how empowering is that, right?
100%.
Like that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the stuff that I wasn't given when we were younger, is I wasn't ever brought along in the conversation, right?
Yeah. It was just like, this is what's going to happen. Buckle up and expect it. And then be the good patient.
Right? This is a rewriting of generational change. This is a rewriting of ways you can experience medicine. This is a rewriting of ways that we can get our children in the next generation to really advocate for themselves in a clinical setting. And we have to do the work alongside, right? Like the exact same thing that we're talking about applies to all of us when we go in for our visits.
Yes. Yes. And I think it is, a lot of that internal work that we have to do, especially if we have come from a background of, being the good girl, or we have had any trauma in that world as well, of, really working on that so that we can show up with the intentionality and not bringing kind of our stuff into their future. Like, let's leave our past where it is and not bring our past into their current, so that because that changes their whole experience, right? If we can start from the jump of like, really focusing on body literacy first and foremost, I think that is so, so important. And I didn't even put two and two together, that just by saying the anatomical terms, that also allows, and if anything, God forbid, does happen, they are able to say what happened. I honestly don't even know if I would have ever put those together. And it makes all the sense in the world to me as to why. And so just having that body literacy, removing all the shame, understanding this is all normal. Literally every single person on the planet is experiencing the exact same thing as you. So it's just like, farting in public or pooping at your boyfriend's house or any of that stuff. They're doing it too.
Yeah.
They are doing it too. And the more that we can just be like, a body is a body, and it's not a reflection on how good you are, your character, whether or not you're valuable, any of those things. These are bodily human functions.
Yeah, and I love, right, when we have people like you who have boys, that we normalize this for their female peers, right, and their menstruating peers. Because when we were in school, we were going with a tampon. Don't you remember? You would like shove it up your sleeve.
Yes, you'd shove it up your sleeve. Yes.
Sleeve and walk to the bathroom so no one would see it.
Yes.
And what a different experience if our, younger menstruating kids can just fucking hold a tampon. Like we couldn't even hold a tampon, let alone be menstruating or bleed through our pants.
No.
And so what a different world it can be when we can empower all of the kids to feel like this is either normal for you or normal for your peers. Yeah. And I think that's where we can see all of these changes really systemically take hold too, is that if we can decrease some of the shame around this, do we get to decrease some of the shame as they go in to see clinicians as well? Yes. And so that's a big piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. And just the fact that there's so much more information. We're in, like our parents weren't able to Google anything. They just we had to take the doctor's word, right? Now we just have so much more access to knowledge. And the more we can, I personally, the more I can educate my kids on the basics, I just feel like then it's just common knowledge. And it's just, if you start young, it's it's not a big deal. And I actually love this current teenage 20-something era where they're just I don't drink, I don't need to, they totally understand what's happening to their body. They see the research, they understand, it's just so different from the way we grew up. And not to be, gosh, it sounds like we're 90, but it's it's a massive change. And there's so much more body positivity. There's so much more I just think awareness in general. And I love being able to, even though I have boys and I will never be in a gynecologist appointment with my daughter, it's just to have them be aware. This is what happens. This is how you treat a person when it's happening. It's not a big deal. And she's probably feeling like crap. So just don't add to it and just make it better in any way that you can. Get your own food, make her a snack. That's where we're heading in this for me. And so, I just think it's really, really helpful to have this information, just feel empowered and know that we're not going to nail it perfectly, but if we are moving in the direction of let's just talk about the parts as they are the parts. And if we need to, let's watch a video on reproductive health together. So we're both and that's that. I think the more neutral we are about the whole thing, that's kind of whenever recently, and I've started adapting this with my ADHD son, because everything feels like a threat. For him, it's he's just constantly on guard and constantly oh shit, did I get in trouble? What am I doing? So I've literally started saying, I need to talk to you for 10 minutes about this, and it's only for 10 minutes and you're not in trouble. So that helps him be if I say, I used to say I need to talk to you about something, and he'd be did you get an email? What happened? He literally be did somebody email you? What do you know? What do you know that I don't know? And I'm no, I just trying to ask you about after school. But for them, it was just it gets them all flustered. So just being so matter of fact of we're going to talk about reproductive health. We're going to simulate what it looks like to be in the doctor's office. This is not a big deal. You're not in trouble. We're just going to feel what it feels like in our body so that we know what to do when we go in there.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times people are like putting off answering certain things because they think it's going to like open up the can of worms at any given moment. And to that, my response is that I think it actually does the opposite, that it kind of like normalizes things more than we would expect. Like with my 5-year-old daughter, I had my period. I'm now using these like menstrual cup kind of things where like there's kind of like free bleed when you go to the restroom, which is like a whole new and different experience for us elder millennials as well. But she was in the bathroom stall with me at an airport, and like I am now like hemorrhaging into the toilet, and she's like, "Mommy, why are you bleeding?" And I'm like, I am on my period, and here's when my period is. And like I did the exact conversation that you talked about with your son, and she just like was like, "Oh, that's weird." And then we just carried on and went to our gate and boarded our plane, right?
Yes.
Like it doesn't have to be this like groundbreaking conversation where I have to explain all of
The birds and the bees and all the things.
And so I think that like so many people put off starting this language because they think it all happens at once. And for that, I would say that I think it actually is, it's less intimidating than you think it is. It really is.
Absolutely. And you know, they're so curious about everything, right? And if they see something, they're going to ask why are you bleeding? You know, and like my youngest, like, do you need a Band-Aid? Like,
Exactly.
you know, and I'm like, well, you don't use a Band-Aid. I use this thing. And he's like, and then what do you do? Like, they're so curious. And so I was just like, well, then I put it here and then I washed my hands and that, you know, and I just like walked him through the whole thing. And he's just like, huh, okay. And moved on. But you know, like we have our code word. Yes, it's so normal. We have our code word. We have egg time. They're super aware, you know, and it's just like, then they get to ask more and more and more questions. So it happens every month. Like, that does it ever end? Like, you know, all this stuff, like, when did it start? So all of this, you know, it's just, they're very, very curious. And we've been talking about it for probably 3 years now. And they're like, huh.
Yeah.
Okay, mom's on her period.
Yeah. So I think that like to kind of circle back, I don't think that you're ever too young. I don't think you ever need to age into it. I don't think you ever need to be afraid of it being a bigger conversation. I think you can use anatomical language at any time. You don't have to earn anatomical language with like being a certain years old. Like I think that you talk to them about every other thing. You understand their language comprehension level and you just adapt the same way you like they have books that go alongside their reading comprehension level. You just have the same anatomical conversation that goes along with their, you know, comprehensive level.
Yeah.
While telling them accurate reproductive healthcare information alongside it.
Yes. Because I'd rather have them learning it from me than a video on socials or hearing from their bros about something on the yard at like at recess. I'm like, no. We got to get the facts. You got to know what's up. Because he'll come back and he'll be like, I heard this. And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. But no, that is not at all what happens. And that's not how it works. But like, please do come to me with any of these like fun facts you're learning because then I can set the record straight. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like, we just got to have these conversations. And I think it's a disservice if we start to have the conversations when puberty is already happening, because first of all, they don't want to really listen to us anyways at that point. Like that ship has sailed. So the more we can get the reps in early just allows for that natural progression of like, now it's not like, Mom, I don't want you to know about this. It's like, oh yeah, we've talked about this for years.
Yep. Yes. And I think when you think about it from a stigmatization standpoint and a reducing stigma of reproductive health care, when we've been talking about it for years, like that's the biggest piece, is that's when they're going to continue to feel comfortable talking to you about it. That's when, as they get older, if they need birth control, they'll talk to you about it. Where if they have symptoms that are consistent with an STD, they can talk to you about it, right? Like all the things that you want as a parent.
Yeah.
I think when you like trace it back, that's the way you get there.
Yeah. Reverse engineer the problem.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Like hopefully they don't get the STD that they need to talk
Right. Let's reverse engineer that for sure. I love it. Well, Nikki, where can people find you? When does your book come out? All that good stuff.
Amazing. So you can find me on all the socials at Nikki Vink. So it's NIKKIVINCK. My book is out on May 19th, and it is available anywhere books are sold. You will probably find that that book is more pertinent to you and your healthcare than it is to parenting and your children. But I think it is all part of the yin and yang of healthcare and the ways that we get to exist in the world right now. So it all goes together, which is fun. And I'm honored to get to share space with you, Becky, and even talk about these things. So it's always fun to be able to kind of tackle the whole equation.
Absolutely. Parenting isn't just, lunches and bedtime routines. It is all of this as well. And, these are really important conversations that we can be pushing off, thinking that those are later problems. Like those are later things that we talk about, but just slowly integrating them and just making it the norm. I mean, what a gift to your kids ultimately. Like, the shame or the discomfort that we have or any of that stuff, it's like if we just open up the conversation, a lot of these things just flow way smoother than we could ever ask for. And their curiosity and the naive way in which they're asking these questions, I mean, it really softens all of it anyways, which is really fun. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nikki, so much. And as always, everybody, thank you for joining me for another week. All right. See you later. Thank you for listening to the Response-Able Parenting Podcast. If you like what you heard, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. If you know someone who would benefit from this podcast, I'd be honored if you'd share this episode with them. Until next time, know that you are enough, you are capable, you've made it through all of your hardest days, and we will keep growing on this parenting journey together. This podcast was produced by Kim Kelty and myself, Becky Jennings, and edited by the Kelty Method, Branding and Podcasting.